Hello and welcome to Higher Ground in Circle Passages, and I'm looking at camera number 2, and this is part 2 of a show that we did earlier. And before we get into that, what I'd like to say is thank you to TC Media, that's what you're watching right now, because without public access television, TC Media in particular, right here in Olympia, we wouldn't be able to do this. You know, it's just amazing. The staff who is here, always incredibly helpful. The equipment is just amazing. We've talked about that before. If we tried to invest in this kind of equipment, it's just, and it's available to anybody in the public. So invite you to come and join us. You know, start your own show, and we'll continue with part 2 of art and healing. Heather, I'm Buck.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If people have actually watched part 1, we ended with collaboration. And I thought that might be a good place to pick up again because we were working with the drums, and it's a collaboration with, you know, the tree and the animal and the imagery and the synchronicity of our experience. And also what I wanted to bring in that I think is really relevant in art, but people don't always understand or perceive, which is that other things, there's an autonomous presence or wisdom that's coming through. And so especially with the drums, often I'll have people tune in, you know, is this drum on behalf of a mountain, or is there another presence or being? It could be an ancestor, or it could even be a god or a goddess. But, you know, what, or a situation. You know, part of mine was healing with cancer, but, you know, what is speaking in and through you, through your art? And so I just wanted to dovetail with that collaboration piece, because I think there are layers to it that most people at least don't consciously realize.
This is true, yeah. I mean, for some of us, just even the fact that I'm going to be attempting some art is pretty scary.
Like the scream.
Yeah, really, exactly. But once you get past all that stuff and actually you're able to get into it, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and again, I just did a project with a younger person, and it was so fun. Like, we just tore our pages and just like scribbled. We made ugly art and we burnt it. And it's all about transformation, you know, and so it doesn't matter, like my art has a certain style, but that's me, you know, like that's like my fingerprint. You know, everybody has a different style, and someone like Picasso, who was the earliest graduate from his art institution, so in a way he reiterated and could draw and paint with a lot of proficiency quite early. And then that allowed him to, you know, make 4 different movements and end up doing what a lot of people would think of and was labeled, you know, derogative term, but primitive. So I don't know. I think art is all about blowing up rules like bridges. So
whatever you're experiencing, whatever you're feeling, let it happen, huh?
Let it happen, yeah.
Wow, that's and that's probably not to really think about it, kind of let it happen. For me, that's what makes it okay. You know, don't get caught up in, I can only do stick people.
Right. Dude, petroglyphs and pictographs are so powerful. And it was honestly really obvious working with this person, because when she was normally creating art, there was a lot of concern about, I don't know, like I don't know how. A lot of people, you'll get, I can't draw a hand, or I can't draw a nose, and it's like, you know, I get it. Like, again, most wounding, we said in the last one, is from art, to include literature, art, painting. So people have had these core wounds and complexes, but yeah, it's about liberation, so.
Yes, definitely. And showed this drum that we had made a couple years ago now, but talk about a collaboration and pulling some different things together. I didn't intend to do that, but I saw that coming together, and then to be able to, with some wonderful guidance from a Sami drum maker, Lori, just let it happen, and boy, it did.
Yeah,
it did.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about your drum, you'll have to go to the first show to get this, but it has these different images, and two-dimensional imagery is a time lapse, so it's a simultaneity in space and time, and I have my space and time images I could talk about later, but what I love is all of those symbols. If you go on a rite of passage, you may have them chronologically or sequentially, but when you put them on an image, a two-dimensional image, they're mapped on top of each other, or simultaneously as a whole. And so that's one of the really powerful aspects, I think, of creating your composition and doing this kind of art, is it's another layer of processing your experience.
And that's the incredible part of that journey. That is, wow. I don't think you can, it just kind of happens. It unfolds, and that was and is such an incredible process all in itself. So good stuff. And you've got some, again, some amazing work
these
here.
are my two recent things. So healing through art. Complexes, I had two pretty much core complexes, working with space and time. So I'm 126 to 0, random, i.e. synchronous, or it's that holism again. It's everything space and time collapse together into a whole. But versus I'm 0 linear sequential. So I constellate meaning and I map. And so what I did was working with kind of my inability to work with space and time. And I thought, well, why don't I create images of this as a way to process the healing and this collaboration of wanting to work with what I believe is an intelligent cosmos, where through synergy and synchronicity, I can be empowered in my work with space and time. And so I ended up mapping this one like a clock in a way, so it goes around this way. So you can see it, imagery, the big telltale difference is you can see it all at once. It's a simultaneity in that sense, and you get it all at once like a vision. Look, we don't have an eye on the snake yet, but it's not quite done. But so you can see it as a whole, but then you can also map kind of like a star chart on top of the globe. And then you have fun things, like I accidentally created the Earth upside down, which I thought was perfect because I'm working with a new worldview, a new way to envision, and I'm also working with quantum physics and a quantum perspective, quantum memory, quantum creativity is all the rage in these different ways. And so it's how you look at the world. And so I thought, it's perfect. It's upside down. and
here we are.
And then here we are. And it feels a little bit upside down.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so it has, for me, it has imagery that's meaningful for me. And that's the whole point is, this is kind of my myth, my story, my way of perceiving space. And if you did it, you would do it totally different. And that's the beauty of art. Yes. You would use a different style, you would use different images, you would tell a different story. And that's the power, is it helps you clarify by putting it onto something outside of yourself. That's the dialogue. Helps to clarify your perspective of what this is. And even like what order do you put them, your composition. So all of that helps to make things clear, to clarify within yourself what it is you believe and think, how you navigate the world. Yeah, and here's my Phoenix time, yeah. I got this great clock from the Goodwill, so I was so pleased with myself.
Definitely.
And time
Can
is,
you hold it up, maybe?
yeah,
and
so
let the
time
camera-
I would love to have as my co-creator and collaborator. So far I feel like we dance, and I probably am stepping on time's toes, and I kind of feel like time is stepping on my toes. I loved the seem like a bird, but yeah, so there's this, again, death and rebirth. A lotus is coming up. Again, death and rebirth here, coming into and out of incarnation. A swallow, the swoop of the swallow to me has that movement of kind of descent and ascent that I can resonate with. And so it's a different way of telling time. It's, of course, it's not really working in the normal way of telling time. But I love that it has sacred geometry. It has a composition that has relationship. It again tells a story. There's a synergy about how the elements go together. And also, kind of like my drum, I'm trying to keep it opaque, both of them a little bit more, so you can see what's underneath too. But so that's a different way of how do you work in healing your relationships to different elements of space and time. I almost actually looked at the Goodwill for technology, because that is definitely something I need to heal my relationship with, as you well know.
I hear you, yes.
Yeah.
But you find another outlet
Yeah.
as you're trying to figure out that.
Yeah, and I'll share this. As you know too, I just went and I met in a parking lot, not for a drug deal, but for an art trade. So I got a number of pieces of art from someone, and it has eyes on it. So these, you could say, these are visionary pieces of art, including our drums. Almost everything we're making, Carl Jung, all of his art. It's a genre that I'm a part of. Alex Gray, William Blake, a shaman into prehistory, But it's essentially opening the eyes of the inner vision. And I love that the eyes are embodied, right? Yes. In her body. White Tara, who I have over there, I didn't show, has the eyes in her hands and her feet, the third eye. So that concept, again, that the body is a knowing organ of perception, that we are learning in all these different ways, and that the sight is not only external, but more importantly, it's internal. And that's the visionary art, is really a symbolic representation of an inner vision or journey. And so this is a contemporary artist print, but has a lot of the imagery, the iconography of like Hildegard of Bingen or earlier representations. So it's my
incredible.
delight, yes. I know.
And that's what's so wonderful too about really appreciating and somebody else's vision, somebody else's art.
Yeah.
It's so where did this come from? Just
right.
The idea of, and just like you've done here too. That's what's so wonderful of you take us on a journey. The artist does in looking at pieces that are done. Wow.
Yeah, and one of the things that Jung used to say, to look at it and have it act upon you as it did upon the artist. And so I think great art has that collective participation mystique from Lucy and Levi Bruhl, sometimes they refer to, but it's those collective roots. Like when I was talking about the magical value of art, and one example, in a group, someone new came and they drew from a sketch at the beginning an image that we'd been working with all year, but they had no idea about. And it was just the most random, rare image. So it was just unfathomable, the improbability of her being able to do that. But it's that ability through art to connect. And that's what art does for us, is it's our transformation and individuation as a species and as a planet, and that to me is my favorite.
And there's so many different mediums too. That's what's amazing too. It's wow. It's whatever kind of gets you inspired, I guess. And
yeah.
How do I want to put that forth?
Yeah, to include our last collaborative art piece was the Earth mandala, you know, where a couple of iterations have gone down before in the same place, which I kind of like,
Yeah,
you know,
building on it,
a temple of Athena becomes, you know, a church and then a mosque and then a church again, and then, you know. But so we have that one location that we've been doing a couple of, I think of them as kind of earth prayer, with found items from nature and flowers and different things, a candle and an altar, a ritual in the center.
Definitely. It's what a wonderful way to just show appreciation too for nature, and like you said, bringing in things from the land that, and then, wow, here's what came of all these different kind of random objects sometimes. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, and that ritual art, the return of the power of art off your walls, again, back into the world. So that's why I love creating those living organic mandalas, or the drums in nature, or, you know, mapping space and time. How can you work with art and collaborate with art to heal yourself, but more importantly, through yourself, to heal the world and to heal others in whatever way?
And again, that part, it's what a wonderful way to it's a learning tool, teaching tool of here's what's going on here, of how you can kind of make that a much more physical thing, whatever the vehicle might be, you know, however it actually comes out.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that drum that I had shown. And there is a painting on it. And I've always been interested in archaeology. So what I originally looked at was, in putting it to the light, they were images without anything put on the surface itself, on the hide. And the archaeology pieces, well, now there are some images, but if you go beneath that surface, those other scenes are still there. So it's, I guess, in a way of, it's not lost, it's still there, it's all working together.
Yeah, and it's
fun.
like a palimpsest, which is a little bit like space and time. We know that we have a different relationship to them. It's almost like we're working with a more materialistic Newtonian concept. But what you're talking about is kind of like a palimpsest, and a lot of early art, whether it's illuminated manuscripts, because the paper was so rare and costly that they would reuse them, but also canvases, you know, even masterworks. Well, now we can tell they have different pieces beneath them, and so all of that is part of the story.
Which is pretty incredible. And you were talking about something earlier, excuse me, it reminds me of the Pyramid of the Magician at Uxmal in the Yucatan. It's 7 different creations of, you know, this latest part was, well, that's where they finished. But under that, there are 6 other layers of, well, here's where it started, and then, well, we're going to build on that, and then build on that. And it's like you were just talking about too, where you see that somebody discovers this incredible painting where there's something underneath the layer that we can see. It's, wow.
And it bleeds through in the influence, and that's what I love about, you know, us creating I feel like it's the foundation of our mandala church on the land, you know, but about consciously recreating in those places where people have essentially building up art as like creating energy. It's building up energy. And so those places, you know, are powerful, energetic containers. You know, that's the talismanic power of art, is it's a storage container or an alchemical container for energy, and then you can tap back into it, and those layers are there whether it's conscious or not, so we can feel them.
Pretty fascinating. You know what's been amazing too, since I've known you, is you're working on multiple projects at the same time, and it's, wow, you know, it's kind of like, but you can step right back into this piece right here, or do that here.
Right.
It's like Whoa, how do you do that?
Well, okay, pluses and minuses. I think it's the 165 random versus 0 linear sequential. Because the way that it is you're working on everything simultaneously. Like everything is interrelated, everything is part of a whole, and you almost, like every thread you can follow to something else. So you just like never end. You're just like, oh, yeah. But the cool part, in a sense, because we're coming into balance and we were talking about different ways of learning styles, it's more of an indigenous way of knowing. So in the Rites of Passage with circle passages, in some of my trainings, they'll go through this whole way of knowing that is totally me. And they'll be like, this is an indigenous way of knowing, and they're reimagining it and re-empowering it, bringing it back. And so I know someone who's Mayan ancestry, and he was just tested, and he got some accommodations because he learns in this way that is similar, visual, simultaneous, embodied. So it's a different way of knowing, and it's just that it's been so marginalized. It's also more a feminine way of knowing, that it's coming back, or at least I'm going to say it's coming back.
Good to hear.
Thank you.
Good to hear. As is hopefully what we're also about
Yeah.
is Rites of Passage. It's kind of unfortunately been put on whatever the shelf is,
Right.
but revitalizing that now. What the importance is of, why is that important to revitalize, bring it back to?
Yeah, and I mean, you're making me think of, we have such living, rich traditions of indigenous native populations that are blossoming. And so I remember going to the Squaxin Island tribe, and they had a button blanket project to help students stay in school, back to our 29,000 in Washington State alone lost students. I mean, wow. But those kind of projects, you know, art and nature are culture, you know, like we're imbuing our traditions and passing them on. And that's another way to look at this, is we have some schisms or some breaks in our lineage traditions. And the native populations talk about that a lot because it was consciously done to them. Their children were separated. But though we haven't had that done to us in the broader culture, I think it's happened in a lot of ways. And that's what the Rites of Passage that we're looking at is trying to do, is go back, help navigate those hard steps, help bridge and create right relationships. And one of the ways to do it that you see in Native culture is through art, you know, that button blanket. And they found that it was actually hugely powerful in terms of the actual evidence-based, you know, outcomes that they were able to achieve.
Something else, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just put it out there. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, you've, excuse me, you've got some other items back here too of the smudging one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Of, again, kind of creating
And Buck
something
the
here.
Smudge Master.
Really well. This has been so wonderful to get reacquainted with what is this all about, you know, and really in ceremony and in ritual of firing this up. And obviously, I mean, this, typically you see them where they might only be about this long.
Right.
But let's just go with this right here, and it's all local stuff, rosemary and some lavender and some rose petals and that sort of thing. But again, there were three of us in this particular time making these, and it was just a wonderful. So what else should we put in here? You know, what else? It's kind of like it calls to you of, well, if you're trying to keep some of the native items, materials, that's what ended up getting in here, and we've used this many times, not just this one, but others.
Yeah, and you know, if people could smell it, the smell is so beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And so distinct. So like art that's all our fingerprints and our, you know, own authentic selves. These are so lovely because, you know, they have all different flowers. And I love the idea of taking native things from your garden, or you, I think, went to a friend's garden. Yeah. and making it in your own way. And so that's a beautiful way to create these smudge wands that we have used many times.
We have, and again, it brings the tradition and the ceremonies back to life again, or revitalize things that have kind of gone by the wayside in some ways. So that's what's exciting too about getting out in with different agencies, the schools, and offering some programming. And one of those things would be with Rites of Passage, of getting in touch with and really paying attention to the passages. You know, I think that's, our pace is so quick in society that, you know, it's like zoom, whatever it is. You know, it's you graduate from high school, and which has been interrupted the last couple of years, but and then you're off and running. So it's not. Let's slow down and really take in what is happening here. You know, just to really appreciate that, I guess, and give I don't know, homage to something that, instead of just letting it fly by.
Yeah, and as I know we've mentioned this, but we are of course circle passages, which is that wholeness of our navigation, our circumambulation of the wheel of time, if you will, and our lives, but it's also intergenerational. And it's a different way of looking at time, so that instead of the linear model where it's like, you know, I'm not there and I can't go there, this is like, I can return and return and return for reiterative healing. And so it's this beautiful model, I think, also indigenous.
Yes, and it's like stepping back and just really honoring what has taken place and has continued for thousands of years, not just for decades, thousands of years. It's amazing.
Yeah. One of the things I'll return to with this is that it has that circle, and for me, because of, you know, wounding in my formative years, it has kind of an Edenic and Eve. That's not really what Eve would look like, but it's a way of me mapping my own story, which is another way of saying this circle. And so the beauty is that it can look different for every person, and then every time you do it, you know, me doing it 100 times, it would look different too.
And that's a really cool process in itself. I was involved with this class. It was a 7-week class, and there were some questions as we were doing the process each week, and we would kind of bring that back and talk about it, and then did that 7-week program several times. And it was amazing how I didn't write the answers in the book. I put it on a piece of paper, but how the answers changed, how some, because and hopefully I was changing, so I was able to kind of reflect that. But like you said, kind of mapping out your own experiences, how wonderful, and you can do that through art.
Yeah, and it's mirroring, obviously. So every time we look in the mirror, it's a different us and a different angle, and
Absolutely. Well, thank you once again. This has been, it's always a treat.
Yeah, thank you, Beck.
And we'll see what we explore next time. But thank you for tuning in, and have a good rest of the day or evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Beck. It was really fun.